I'm going to demonstrate building this high heel section from this perfume bottle. I have a tutorial for the other two parts, this front section, which is the glass bottle, and then this heel up here with the actuator button on it. So now I'm going to build this heel piece here. So what I did from this front view is I just essentially, took my photograph that I have here and just traced this front curve and the back curve. And I'm going to use those as guides because I'm going to do a loft to actually make this part. I'm not going to use those as rails. It just seemed to work better here. So I'm going to build the heel part smooth just so we can see our basic geometry. And then I'm going to also loft it so we can get this subtle little fluted rib pattern in here. I'll show both ways to do that. So once we trace that, we'll have those lines. And then we need the, let's go into perspective. We need the bottom edge of the closure because that's where the top of this is going to come from. So let's go into shaded. So right here, this bottom surface at the bottom here, that's where the heel is going to come from. So I need to just extract the line work. I'm not going to take the surface, but I just took the lines from that. So just select those and brought those over, and I'm going to bring that down here and put them right next to these guidelines to get this part to be built. So once I did that, let's zoom in over here. So I brought all the line work over here in my parts. So here's the fluted part that we're going to build, but I'm going to build the straight part first. So all I really did was from the top view. So I have this lined up so that we know exactly what that angle is. And then I have these two guide curves here in the front and back. And I'm going to use those to position these curves down here. So what I did was I just made a half curve here. So from the top view, top. So I created here's my main curve up at the top. So I just created these two curves here. So it comes from the tangent. I think I did it with my oval tool, and then I probably just cut it in half and created one, and then created this other smaller one at the bottom. So once I made those, I used my guide lines front to position that. Let's go back into wireframe. So I just put those into position here and made sure they lined up as best as possible because I'm only going to use these curved shapes. I'm not going to use these rails, these two lines I traced to build my part. I'm just going to use those as a guide. So to position these takes a little bit of back and forth. I'm doing it with three. Three usually gives us a nice kind of a natural curve. And it's a matter of moving these around. Like if I move it closer, I'll have a little bit more tension on the curve. And if I move this further down, it'll be a little bit more of a graceful curve. So it's a matter of playing with the position of these to get that to work. And then you loft and you take a look at it. So I had moved these around quite a bit. So this is ready to go. This front line is really not critical at this point. I just use that as a guide to center this other point. So this comes right from the geometry up there, and I took those and connected those together. So let's get rid of that one. So we should have that one piece right there, and that's where that comes from. So by selecting that and these other two here, I can just go to my loft tool, which is in surface tools. And it's the one right here, and I loft. And then that creates that surface. So it's pretty straightforward. So then to create this front surface, what I need to do, I'm going to also loft that, but I'm going to click the tool first, and then I'm going to select these segments right here. This one and that one, and enter, and then that creates that flat surface across the front. So that's really it. So these are surfaces. I really don't need to make it a solid for the rendering purposes. I mean, I could, if I stitch these all together, I could cap the bottom. Now the top, I would have to build a surface up there to put that together to make that a solid, but I don't necessarily need to go through that. So that's making that part smooth. So the one that's a little bit trickier is to get the fluting on there. So I'm going to use the same process where I'm going to loft, but I'm going to play with the points here. So let's say we can rebuild objects. This is a rebuild sequence. So right now it has a certain amount of points that are on here. What I'm going to do is add points to this evenly all across that with the rebuild tool. And I'm going to move some of the points around. So I've done this a couple of times. It took a while to do that. And I figured out what I need to do is I'm going to go back into my um, curve tools. And right here, we have this rebuild curve. So I'm going to select that. And like I said, I've done this. So I'm going to put 80 points on there. I can't even remember what there was originally. It might have been like 19 or something like that. Yeah, here it is. Yeah, here's the original count. So I'm going to do that at 80 and say, okay. The reason I picked 80 is because I want to select some of these and move them. So let's move in a little closer. Okay, that looks correct. All right, so once we select all the points, then we can go to the top view. And what we're going to do is we're going to move those in, and it'll automatically create the curves that we need for this fluted pattern. So I'm going to go to the, well, actually, I'm not going to move, I'm going to scale. So scaling, and we'll do this at continuous scale. All right, so I'm going to snap, I'm going to pick a point about here. I'm going to come over here and not ortho. Oh yeah, I do want ortho on, and we'll scale in. So I'm going to bring those in, and it's going to create kind of a natural curve when we do that. So I'm sort of guessing. I think I did about like that. So you can see how it's creating this nice kind of a curve shape all the way around. But if we go to the front view, what it did was it moved them down also because I did an even scale. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move these up, no copy, and we're going to do ortho. And I'm just going to guess here. I'm going to move this back. I kind of want this back up all into one plane. It's not absolutely imperative, but I'm going to get it close. So I'm going to bring those all back up to that same curved edge from this view. So if we go into perspective, we now have this kind of curved pattern. So I have these 2 points here. By having those 2 points in between, out here is maintaining my shape. So the curves just went in. So that just takes a little bit of back and forth to get that to work. So what we can do now is we can take this shape and I can loft that with these other 2 shapes. So with lofting, what it's going to do is since these curves down here don't have the fluted pattern in it, what will happen is like if I fluted this, if I lofted this top part with the flutes in it and I lofted it to the bottom, this fluting pattern will bottom out to 0 approximately halfway down. It sort of splits the difference between the 2 curves. But since I have this other curve in the middle, the fluting pattern is going to fade away halfway between these 2 sources, which is what we want. We don't want it to go all the way down to the bottom because it's very similar to how the actual object works. So all we have to do is once we move those points, we just need to select, again, the 3 sources and loft. So we go back to the surface tools, loft. I'm going to leave everything the way it is here because it's going to work pretty well without that. So now we've created that loft pattern. I think it's very similar to what originally I did there. So let's just look at that in, it's a little hard because we have all our ISO lines in here. So let's look at this in rendered. So we can see how the pattern is fading out right about in here. And that's about where it is on the actual object, which is quite nice. So now we have this nice fluted pattern. This is a great, I've done this with bottle designs and a whole bunch of different things where we have this kind of nice fluted pattern that we want to run partially down a shape. So that works really well. So again, all we would have to do is create the front surface here, and we can go back to loft and select these two edges, enter, and then that just finishes off the front surface. And again, for the rendering that I'm going to do with this object, we're not going to see this bottom, but we could cap that off and put a little radius down there. That might be a little bit more realistic. And we can just put that into position, and then that fits really well. And I think I have all this set up here. Let's go into shaded. So here are all the parts with the fluted heel, and we have the actuator with the button, and then we have the glass part. So that's it on building that part. So we'll bring it together, and I'm going to do a final tutorial with all of these parts together, and we'll work on rendering and doing wall thicknesses and some materials and things like that to get this to work.